Just tell the people, what is the Quantum 10?
Thank you for asking. I get super excited when I hear people asking questions about the Quantum 10. And again, it started as a thought process. It started as a conversation, a thought in my head. And there are 10 elements that I see, and I've worked across 5 counties, and I see them practiced in silos all the time, but they're evidence-based. And so those elements are Maslow's hierarchy of needs, growth mindset, culturally responsive practices, universal design for learning, restorative practices, positive behaviors, interventions, and supports, response to intervention, inclusive practices, social emotional learning, trauma-informed practices. And with that, there's a center. The center is I consider the core 4, which is family and community engagement, adaptive leadership, high quality instruction, and student-centered culture, which ends up with opportunity, access, engagement, and success for all. So that is pretty much the Quantum 10.
So tell us more, break it down. You have 10 elements there. And one of the last things I heard you say was student-centered. You're talking about engagement, social emotion, you're talking about family, community. So how did all 10 of those even come to be?
They're evidence-based practices that are like really well, and I'll say 8 of the 10 of these are found in the Every Student Succeeds Act. So it's our national educational policy. And so with that, people are practicing in silos sometimes, and sometimes they're practicing in tandem, but not intentionally integrating. And so I've been a part of a PBIS school. I've seen we a trauma-informed school. People say, I'm all about social emotional learning, but it's rare that they'll talk about the 10 in tandem, or even a few of the 10 in tandem. And so my thought process was, I kind of was like thinking to myself, like, why don't we do this together? And so I kind of like did a little drawing where I was like, okay, here's the circles. They don't separate. Let's work in tandem with this, but don't forget about our families. Don't forget about our community. Don't forget that we have to have high quality instruction. We have to ensure that we have an adaptive leader, because Quantum 10, which the nickname for Quantum 10 is Q10, is a leadership framework. And it is, teachers are excellent with this framework. They can use it in their classrooms. They can work in tandem with all of the elements. If a leader doesn't believe in this and see this, that this is good practice for all students and for their entire organization, then you'll have like pockets of excellence. But when leaders look at the framework and see, oh, if we do this school-wide or district-wide, then what we have is we have a whole system of engagement, access, opportunity, and success for all of our students. I want to give an example only because people say, well, yeah, I know them all. I do this and then I do that. When we talk about, I'll just say trauma-informed practices, we want to make sure that we have family and community engagement as well, because we have students coming to school with trauma, and then we send them back to the same trauma that they came with, but we don't work with families to ensure that the same trauma doesn't continue to repeat itself. And then with that, we also think about our students' cultural background. So we don't just go in and say, here's some great practices for teachers and train them. We want to make sure that teachers and leaders and educators are understanding our students' cultures as we are being trained in all of these areas to work with our students with academics or even positive behaviors. Whatever we decide to work with our students, we want to look at multiple aspects and not just, trauma-informed or social emotional. We want to include culturally responsive practices. And when we talk about the intentional integration, we're talking about growth mindset as well. If a staff does not have a growth mindset, if they don't believe that all students can, then what happens is that we have educators that might believe some students can, but others can't. So then those students who they believe can't don't excel. So that growth mindset integrated with these other practices is important. We talk about Maslow's, right? We all hear the term Maslow's before Bloom. We want to make sure that all of our students have everything that they need, their basic needs met. Kids that come to school hungry or, with clothes that are not clean cannot function. They can't think, so we want to make sure that we have everything that they need first before we can start to ask them to do something academic. And I'm just going to point out universal design for learning. Integrated with all of these practices, making sure that students have multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression, and on and on. I can go on about this framework. And I'm going to say one last thing, and then you can keep us going if you like. But as a result of the framework, there has been a conference. This is the 4th annual, and it will be in person in Irvine, California. And that is what I'm most proud of right now. It will be in December 2023. In Irvine, California.
All right. And do know the gift to table. This is not just for educators. You heard the Quantum 10. Anyone can come. So what I do want to kind of go back to is something that I want to ask you about and that is, let's talk a little bit about equity and leadership, because what you're saying has a lot to do with equity. Where are leaders right now making gains, and where are we falling short when it comes to being equitable as a leader?
That's a great question. And I'll say that, let me talk about different levels of leadership. And the reason why is because when we talk about, I'm not really a person that likes the system of hierarchy, but I'm understanding it more as I'm, in different roles of why we have to have that system. But I still don't particularly care for it, because sometimes it makes people feel like they're inferior or they're superior. But I do want to talk about the levels, because I want to start with the level where we're hiring high level managers, or high level leaders, I should say, not managers. But we need to, what we're doing is we're making gains in the area of recognizing that we have to do something different than what we've done in the past, which is hire people that look like us, sound like us, are like us, socialized in Western civilization here to fit a certain mold, make, and shape. And so we are looking more. I see leaders looking more at their the demographics of the city in which they work, or in which they are serving, I should say, and utilizing that as a gauge as to what we need for leaders. And I see that more now. I mean, are we perfect? No. But are we making gains in that area? I would say we are making gains in the area at that level. And then I'll say the same goes for when we are working on school sites. People know now, there's research out about specifically Black males in earlier grades or in education in general that make an impact, not on just African-American students or Black students, but on all students. And that's what the research says. There's an impact on all students when you have a Black male in an educational facility. And so people are understanding that more and more. And we are also making gains in the area of ensuring that we are looking at, I think I mentioned our demographics and ensuring that, but our language, understanding that language learners may not necessarily only be students who speak a different language, but also students who come in with a language, a home language that is English language, but it's a different dialect of English. As we know, sometimes those of us that are of African descent or some other descent, we code switch, and as we're code switching, we are conforming to what Western civilization society here in the United States, or California specifically, because that's where we are, says that you need to speak this way, learn this way, understand this way in order to be successful. I think we're making gains, and I don't know that we're making large gains, but I've seen and heard educators understanding that these individuals are language learners, and we don't have to go in and correct their home language, but we can give them other options and say, hey, yes. And when we're here, you can also say this versus correcting them and saying that's wrong. We're making a few gains, a little bit of gain in saying, hey, I love that you're calling, I love your sneakers. If that's what you say at home, I love your sneakers. And you can also call them tennis shoes versus saying, nope, that's not what it's called. So I think we're making some gains.
Where are some areas in which you say that we are still falling short?
I think that we still have a long way to go when we talk about racial equity, because now what we're up against is looking at all areas of deficits, all areas of equities, and saying we have to fix this, but we're not going to touch this because people are just not comfortable talking about race. I see a lot of my colleagues want to do something about it. They just don't know what. I think that we have a long way to go when we talk about how do we level the playing fields and stop treating certain ethnic groups as inferior. And I'll specifically speak for myself as a Black woman. Sometimes I, go into a space and people are surprised at my level of education. They're surprised at what my job title is. They look at me like, why are you here sometimes? And so, and I'm not saying that to be negative. And I'm saying that to be, that's my experience. My experience is that people are still surprised. And it's like, why are you surprised? Or surprised at how I speak? Like, oh, you're so articulate. And so are you, so I think that those are some of the areas that we still need to grow in.
I love the comeback. And so are you. I'm about to start using that one.
Yeah.
Wow, you speak so well. Hey, so do you.
Yeah.
Where did you go to school?
Yeah.
Listen, I get tired of being the pseudo exception to the rule. We've got a lot of information from you, and I already see we're going to have you come back to take your seat for the third or fourth time here at the table. But looking back on all of your experiences and looking back on, this idea of transforming and providing, these opportunities for people, what would you tell yourself now about how to engage people with identifying true areas of transformation for themselves? If you could look back and tell yourself something now, what would that be?
I would definitely tell myself to be intentional. Be intentional about everything that you do. And sometimes I get emotional when I tell stories, and I'll tell a quick story. I recall years ago, I was working in K-12. Of course, I'm still in K-12, but I was working at a school site, and I had a student that was transitioning, transgender, and I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I just knew that the student needed support. And so I get emotional a little bit when I talk about it, but I knew the student needed support. And so I just did what I thought was the right thing to do by supporting the student. We'll fast forward when we connect and we meet in adulthood. The student wanted to know questions about how were you able to support me so well? And I was like, I just knew that you needed this support. And the reason why I get emotional is because the student did mention that they were suicidal, but thought about me at multiple times of considering suicide and thought about how supportive I was. And that right there wasn't intentional, although I was doing it. And I said, how do I duplicate that? How do I do this on purpose? And so be intentional, Talisa, former Talisa self. Be intentional about everything that you do so that you make the most impact. One other quick story was a student years ago, and the student came into class on a regular basis, but didn't speak English. I only had the student for a semester, but by the end of the semester, this student invited me to their house for lunch, wanted me to meet their parents and their home. And I didn't understand why, but I found out later. And so the student asked me a question. The student says, why did you help me? Once she learned English, why did you help me? Where I'm from, sometimes teachers don't help us, and I said, well, that's what teachers do. And so the student said, I thought I was going to die when I walked into your class because of what I see on the news from my country, what I see on the news about Black people. So I didn't know what to expect. And I invited you to my house so that my parents could see what what Black people really are about. And so I get emotional about those stories because I don't know what I was doing at the time. So I would tell myself now to do whatever you were doing on purpose. It would have made more of an impact then. And now fast forward, everything you do, be intentional. Do it on purpose.
I love that. And what that is like, listen, whenever you get on the stage to speak, I need you to lead with that last story, especially if you're in a space where it's mixed group of people, amongst colleagues. And powerful television, news, and the narrative that people hear about other people. Because why would that child need to be fearful walking into your class just because she saw your complexion before she saw your capacity, before she saw your compassion? She focused on your complexion. But the barriers you broke, whatever that was then, that demystified whatever the myths were that she heard, that she was compelled to have you come into her home. That's like when people invite you to their home.
Yes.
That's a big deal.
Yes.
Because she wanted to show her parents it's not true.
Right.
It's not true. Because what if she would have decided to ditch your class every time? Or every time she came in contact with an African-American teacher or whomever, could you imagine? That's the impact. That's the impact. People have to get the table. That's the impact. And teachers are leaders. You talked earlier about the leadership roles. A leader is a leader wherever you are.
Right.
We're leaders in our home. We're leaders in whatever space we're in. that was a leadership move. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing those two stories. Now, looking ahead, what is it that you want and what is it that you need?
So looking ahead, well, first I'll say I want people to be intentional about making a positive impact. So whatever you do, plan it, do it on purpose. If you want to walk into a room and you want people to feel welcome, you want them to feel seen and heard, do that on purpose. And I'll share that when you, there are people in this world and on this earth that can pick up on energy. So when you're doing something other than being intentional, they're interpreting that you're intentionally trying to make them feel uncomfortable. So what we have to do is be purposeful about that. So I keep saying intentional because that's my thing right there, and impact. What I need is for people to keep pouring in, and I will continue to do the same. And I also need for people to look at the Q10, look at the Quantum 10, look at those elements, see how you can intentionally integrate those elements. And if you don't know how, come to the conference. We will show you, we will work with you, reach out so that we are intentionally integrating the Q10 elements for synergy, for impact, for positive engagement for all of our students and our staff. Register for the conference. That's another thing I need. Registration is open. You can go to the website and we will be happy to support you as you go forward with your journey for excellence in everything that you do on your school, your campus, outside of education. Come on, let's go. Let's do this work.
Let's go. That's what we're going to do. And be sure we're going to put the flyer, the save the date on my website, thegiftedtable.com. So our viewers can go there and then and tell the family here at the Gifted Table, what is your website so that they can go there as well?
Q10, that's the letter Q, the number 10, equityineducation.com.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Queen, for being here. Thank you so much. I have enjoyed having you here again at the Gifted Table, and we're going to see you in the near future again. And we're going to focus more on the Quantum 10 the next time you pull up your seat nice and close and intentionally here at the Gifted Table.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much, Queen. We keep pouring into each other, and let's keep pouring into the rest of the world so that we can empower people to empower people to empower people.
That's what we're going to do. And like you said, let's go. So thank you all for being here today at the Gifted Table. Give this video a big thumbs up. Give it 2, give it 3. Don't forget to share this link with someone else. And if you're not currently a subscriber, be sure to subscribe so you can get the notifications of our upcoming episodes. It's been a joy. We're going to be back soon. So subscribe, become a member or a subscriber of the Gifted Table. But until next time, remember, stay grounded, innovative, fierce, transparent every day. In other words, stay gifted. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.